General Napoleon Bonaparte, as part of a grand French offensive against the Austrian Empire and its Italian allies, has just achieved a stunning triumph. In just 2 weeks, his army of Italy has split his opponent's forces, won a series of battlefield victories, and compelled the Kingdom of Piedmont Sardinia to sue for peace. Having defeated Piedmont, Bonaparte now prepares to face the retreating Austrian army. With his forces still scattered across its territory, he must concentrate his men and gather supplies to support the shift eastward. To replenish his losses, Bonaparte receives 7,000 badly needed reinforcements, bringing his main force up to 37,600 men. He reorganizes his army into 4 divisions, commanded by the experienced generals La Harpe, Augereau, Massena, and Serrurier, as well as an advance guard, made up of elite grenadiers and cavalry. Meanwhile, the Austrians have been delayed north of Alessandria as they await the completion of a bridge to cross the Po River. General Beaulieu, the cautious and elderly Austrian commander, plans to delay the French advance as long as possible by holding defensive lines along the many rivers that bisect the plains of Lombardy. Over the next week, he establishes a cordon of men to hold the north bank of the Po, while his main force positions itself several miles behind it, poised to counter wherever the French decide to cross. By the 5th of May, Bonaparte is ready. In a brilliant strategic maneuver, he begins to outflank Beaulieu's entire position. Aware that all of the river crossings are heavily defended, he marches rapidly to Piacenza with his advanced guard and La Harpe's division, covering 40 miles in just 36 hours. Along the way, they requisition all available boats, ferries, rafts, and barges, allowing them to cross at any location. Meanwhile, Bonaparte directs his most reliable divisional commander, Massena, to feign a crossing near Salé, in hopes of diverting Beaulieu's attention away from the movements of the main army. Beaulieu, however, is not fooled by Massena's deceptive activities. Receiving word of the French movements south of the Po, he hurries his main force eastward, but he severely underestimates the speed of Bonaparte's advance. By the time the French begin moving across the Po River near Piacenza on May 7th, only one Austrian division, commanded by General Liptay, is in the area, and it is unable to prevent the French from crossing. At noon on May 8th, the French advance guard, with support from La Harpe, begins an outflanking attack against Liptay at Fombio. Fighting is fierce, with the French suffering heavily at the hands of the well-fortified Austrians. To avoid being encircled, Liptay abandons his position and makes a fighting withdrawal towards the Adda River. Bonaparte joins a small contingent led by his hussars in pursuit, leaving the rest of his army to expand the bridgehead. Liptay, remaining just ahead of the vigorous pursuit, arrives in the town of Pizzighettone near nightfall, having suffered 600 casualties. Thousands more of his men are left scattered from the rapid retreat, leaving him with only a fraction of his original force. Later that evening, Beaulieu's advance guard approaches the French bridgehead, hoping to support Liptay. Uncertain of French dispositions, Beaulieu orders his leading units to spread out in search of the enemy. Around 10 p.m., an Austrian detachment unexpectedly encounters part of La Harpe's division at Codogno, and without orders, launches an assault. Chaotic fighting erupts in the darkness. La Harpe, who has been dining with his staff, rushes to the center of the town to investigate, but is caught in a crossfire and killed, possibly even by his own men. The confused fighting continues until morning, when Berthier arrives with reinforcements and drives off the attackers. General Menard is appointed to replace La Harpe, whose death is a major blow to the French army. Moreover, the army is so fatigued and strung out by the advance that Bonaparte has no option but to halt, just short of cutting off the Austrian retreat. As Beaulieu comes to the alarming realization that Lipthay has been defeated, and the French army is attempting to cut off his line of retreat, he decides to fall back towards Mantua, Austria's most strategically important fortress in northeast Italy. With his main path of escape already cut off, Beaulieu rushes his forces along a northerly route to the bridge at Lodi. Arriving around noon on the 9th of May, Beaulieu, along with most of his army, successfully crosses the river ahead of Bonaparte's weary forces. Sabatendorf, whose division trails the rest of the army, assumes the role of rearguard as the French resume their advance. After a grueling all-night march, Sabatendorf's 9,600 exhausted soldiers enter the small town of Lodi. With the French not far behind, he must deploy his ragged forces, giving them no time to rest. He stations Vukasovich's troops around the town itself to delay the French, while his remaining men cross the river in order to set up a more sustainable defensive position. At 9 a.m. on the morning of May 10th, the French advance guard arrives and engages with several of Vukasovich's battalions outside Lodi. After a few hours of skirmishing, the outnumbered defenders pull back behind the dilapidated town walls. French commander Dallemagne sends his grenadiers to penetrate the town. They scale the wall and open the gate to allow the rest of the attackers through. Pouring into the town, the French drive the remainder of Vukasovich's men across the 200-yard-long bridge. Alarmed by these developments, Sabatendorf positions 3 battalions of Croatian infantry along with 14 cannon at the far end of the bridge. Bonaparte, following closely behind Dallemagne's advanced guard, arrives in Lodi. He immediately begins to set up a large battery of artillery to fire on the defending Austrians while he awaits the arrival of the rest of his army. The artillery duel between the French and Austrians is intense, lasting much of the afternoon. Bonaparte himself moves forward to aim the cannon, inspiring his men and helping to wear down Austrian defenses. He orders his available cavalry to cross the river at a ford 2 miles upstream, intending to coordinate a flanking attack with a rush of French infantry across the bridge. While waiting for the cavalry to get into position, he allows his exhausted troops several hours to rest and prepare. However, at 6 p.m., with darkness approaching and no sign of the cavalry, he orders the main attack on the bridge to begin. The elite 2nd Carabinier Battalion, commanded by the towering Pierre-Louis Dupas, leads the charge across the bridge. But when Austrian artillery unleashes a hail of grapeshot, the attack falters. At this critical moment, a group of distinguished French leaders, including Massena, Berthier, Lannes, and Bonaparte himself, race onto the bridge to spur the men forward. As French soldiers near the end of the bridge, many climb down to a sandbank beneath it. They form a line of skirmishers who open a brisk fire on the defending Austrians. Under pressure from relentless French artillery, increasingly heavy musket fire, and the threat of enemy cavalry to the north, the Austrian line breaks. Fear of being cut off by the overwhelming attack causes the defenders to abandon their positions and all of their artillery. Now heavily outnumbered, and with night falling, Sebottendorf begins a fighting retreat towards Fontana. The advanced guard of the French army pursues for several miles, capturing many prisoners. They stop only when 14 squadrons of Austrian cavalry arrive to help screen Sebottendorf's retreat. The Austrians have suffered over 2,000 casualties, nearly 4 times that of the French. Bonaparte, satisfied with his army's accomplishments, allows his victorious men to get some well-earned rest. Although Bonaparte's dash across the Lodi Bridge achieves near-mythic status, thanks in large part to his own account of the action, it was in fact a rather modest battle, with limited strategic results. However, his courage under fire, along with the impressive display of fervor by his troops, strengthens the bond between commander and soldiers, which will be critical in the battles ahead. Within days after the battle, as the Austrians retreat and the French occupy Lombardy, Bonaparte enters Milan in triumph, cheered on by enthusiastic crowds of citizens who long for an end to Austrian oppression. However, his elation is tempered when he receives instructions from the Directory, ordering him to split his army. A substantial portion would join Kellerman, who is to continue the advance against Austria. Bonaparte, on the other hand, is tasked to lead the remainder of his diminished army into central Italy, a modest campaign with little opportunity for future glory. Horrified by the orders which would marginalize his role, Bonaparte immediately responds with a lengthy dispatch, in which he criticizes the proposed division of his army and insists that a single commander should be in charge. He implicitly threatens to resign if he is not left in sole command. In less than 10 days, the government backs down and confirms Bonaparte's authority to run the campaign as he wishes. The government's deferral to Bonaparte's authority brings forth a massive increase in his self-confidence and a belief in his ultimate destiny.